So again, shift gears, and then I'll start to wrap up pretty quick. I think trade has become an issue, I think, to keep an eye on. This is the share of pork production that's exported over time, U.S. pork production that's exported. You see really strong growth here, and that gets back to my comment about, of that overall demand growth, what share is, domestic versus abroad? Well, this seems to suggest a lot of it is very positive export demand growth. The last few points here are projections. But certainly here in the last several months, as y'all have lived through this, really a lot of export growth. This is just data on where that growth is coming from over time, and maybe not much surprising here to this group, but the increased purchases from China as they work through, had problems with African swine fever, but then also as they come out through COVID and are maybe delivering on some of their promises of trade deals, seem to really be a key contributor to that increase in export growth. This is that same data, but just taking total exports. What share of those totals are different countries? You can see back 20 years ago, Japan was a big, much bigger player. Here, you had some other countries. Mexico became pretty big, but here in more recent months, it's been China that's been the big player, which maybe asks a question of, is the industry, one concern might be, well, we've had a lot of interest in exports from China. Are we too reliant on demand from China? So one of the things I did is just take that data I was just showing you and calculate an index, which is a diversity index, and scale it from 0 to 1, which is 1 would be if there was, of all those trading partners, an equal share of trade went to all of them, versus down here, you only had one trading partner. So this would be not very diverse. There's not really a lot of change in this over time. Actually, there's a little bit of an increase here whenever, we went from Japan being the majority to something a little smaller, but not a lot of change here. And it does seem to suggest that, at least at the moment, despite the fact that, China could be unpredictable at times, I wouldn't call this necessarily worrying in terms of the overall diversity. One thing that could be worrying, though, in terms of population is I think in agriculture, we've come to expect demand growth coming from this ever steady increase in population. More mouths to feed means extra demand out there. It's going to gradually pull up prices. But what we're seeing at the moment in terms of population projections is that maybe we're not going to have that slow, steady population growth that we've come to expect over time. So these are just a few headlines that I cherry picked out of some various publications. But here's one from the New York Times, where it actually talks about China maybe having a population crisis, not because they're going to have too many, but too few. And if you really break it down in terms of what's going to happen to population, of course, it's always risky business to predict, but this is UN data making population projections. And they tell very different stories across the world in terms of different incomes. So here's the high income countries, US, Canada, Western Europe, really expecting actually, not much population growth over the next 20 to 30 years. Most of that demand growth, or most of the population, and thus demand growth, is going to come in medium and particularly high income, or not high income, but low income countries. In particular, sub-Saharan Africa is some of the countries really contributing to this growth. So I think, as you look out into the future, keeping an eye on where that population is growing and the relative importance that trade has taken on for this industry, in asking the question about where is that demand going to come from, I think is something to really, keep an eye on for.